I reckon that people put some of these. People forward and around with that. Which is 5:30. Go from there. Yeah, just a bit quiet, man. Up this slowly. A couple more seats up the back there, these little boys. Up the back there, are they? Yeah, that was all of them, wasn't it? Sorry? Yeah, alright.
Ready to go, Danny? All good? Yep. You guys at the vacuum, you alright? Yep. Alright. We're going to, well, the guys at MoTackle here are going to put on some drinks and some pizzas shortly, but first of all, we're just going to kick things off with the guys from Pure Fishing, or Berkley. We'll talk about their range of products. But firstly, I'd just like to welcome you all here. Say a big hi to the guys at home watching on Facebook Live or YouTube Live. I'd like to introduce Mark Phillips, the Berkley brand manager, and Tim Sorton, the New South Wales state manager for Berkley Pure Fishing. They're both up here to fish our Flathead comp this weekend, and hopefully you guys can learn a few things about the Berkley range of products beforehand. So make them feel welcome, and hopefully you learn some stuff from them.
How are we, guys?
Very good.
Who's been catching them?
Not yet.
Yeah? How big?
Oh, outside. Stab them.
No, we're talking about flat dogs here.
Yeah,
Any 3 metres? Huh? Yeah, very good. Rightio.
2.8.
So who here uses Berkley products? Rightio, what's your favourite Powerade colour? Give me one.
Camo.
That's a gulp. Rightio, so we might do a little bit of a history lesson. So, Berkley Bedell, young boy, 15 years old, delivering papers in the snow, Spirit Lake, Iowa. In winter it's about -15 every day. He got tired of doing that and thought to himself, there's got to be a better way to make a buck. So he started tying flies in a spare bedroom in his mother's house. Before too long, he was selling flies to businesses all around the lake. It was quite successful. And not long after that, he actually had 3 people employed helping him tie his flies. That was in 1936, 37. Not long after that, World War II broke out and he went to war. When he came back from the war, he started the business up. He started Berkley. And the first product that he made was called Steel On. It was nylon-coated steel leaders. And it was very successful. So right from the get-go, Berkley Bedell was an innovator, a true innovator. The next product he got involved with was monofilament fishing line, and he struck up a relationship with a little business by the name of Japon. So Japon is quite a well-known business globally, and he made trolling fishing line. Once again, another world-leading product, and is still in the market today. So Berkley Bedell was basically looking at ways to grow his business, and he got into graphite rods. Right about the time the US was putting a man on the moon, Berkley Bedell was working on bringing high modulus graphite to the hands of American anglers. Around about the 80s, soft plastic lures were becoming a real force in the US freshwater bassoon. Berkley Bedell wasn't really content with just being an also-ran, he wanted to be a leader. So he employed a couple of key people. Dr. Keith Jones was the first guy, and then another guy by the name of John Prochnow. Now these 2 guys worked really, really hard for a lot of years, and they developed a first range of lures, and I believe they're called Strike. And hot on the heels of that was a market-breaking product called Power Bait. Now we got it in Australia, and it certainly changed the way that I fished, changed the way a lot of us fished. Yeah, Timmy and the guys will tell you in the tournament scene, it really turned the scene on its head. Berkley really was interested in looking after the environment. So after they worked out how to put scent into PVC baits, they were hot on the heels of producing a biodegradable bait. He wanted something that was going to be really effective at catching fish and was also kind to the environment. So he set John Prochnow a task, who is a biochemist, and said, I want to make a biodegradable soft bait. And they scratched their heads for a while and tried all sorts of different concepts until they came up with a formula that they thought was going to fly. And we got our hands on some of the very first samples that came to Australia, and I remember fishing power bait and gulp side by side, and gulp just blew it away. It was amazing. So I think the biggest point of difference between most soft plastics and gulp is most soft plastics are what we call PVC. So if you look at the downpipe behind you, that's PVC. And that's what most soft plastics are made out of, is polyvinyl chloride. Gulp is a water-based matrix. So as soon as that bait hits the water, it's releasing scent. So you don't just have the action of the lure that induces a reaction strike, you also have that scent trail. When the fish grabs it, it actually hangs onto it. Now, how many people here have actually cast a lure, cast something in the water with a gulp in the end of your jig head, get a big belly in your line, and all of a sudden you wound up, there's a fish there. That's because the fish just hangs onto it in his mouth and he just keeps swimming. And that in itself is what what makes golf so effective. I was in New Zealand last week, or a couple of weeks ago, and especially with another guy on the back of the boat, he had a big line belly, put a cast out, and kept my line fairly straight, got the bite, went whack, and all of a sudden he said, oh, I'm on 2. Anyway, in a couple of winds I noticed our rod tips doing this in unison. So we got the same fish, we took the same fish, he's eating both baits. Sure enough, got the snapper in, had both baits in his mouth. The first one was down fairly deep, the second one was right in the mouth. So it sort of sells at wholesale how effective it is. I'm going to hand over to Tim and I'll let you tell him a little bit about his experience with power bait and gulp and how it's changed the way that he fishes.
Yeah, how are we guys? So I've used gulp now for, I think it's probably 15 years. The original sand fishing, any system is to replicate what the fish are naturally eating. So those fish, this time of year in our systems, the prawns are starting to run, so throwing small gulp shrimps around is always my favourite style of fishing, especially in a system like Warunga where there's, I do hear myths of these big flathead in there, but I'm yet to see one. I've done this comp for 4 years now, and we actually won the 3-man team last year, but we didn't catch a flathead over, I think 56 centimetres is the best one I've got here in 4 years, so it definitely holds a lot of small fish in there. There was a young fella last year, I think he got one that was 80 something centimetres, so that's a great effort, but I'm still yet to see one. But yeah, I think fishing those systems, matching the hatch is what I like to do, and having so many small fish in there, my advice to you guys would be, try and, if you want to stack up some numbers and not just chase that big fish, would be to match, the hatch with those baits. There's going to be a couple of guys that will throw what we've got behind us here and some big swim baits around, and we'll be lucky enough to, jag that one big fish. But I do a lot of tournament fishing, mainly brim stuff, flathead when I come up here. But to rack up numbers and rack up points, my advice to you guys would be to throw smaller baits around and catch those fish from 40 to 50 centimetres, or 56 is what I knocked out, killing it. But yeah, it's not to say that you won't catch a big flathead on a small bait. I've caught flathead in systems like Lake Macquarie, Newcastle Harbour, Sydney Harbour, up to high 90 centimetre fish on 2 and 3 inch baits, so they definitely eat them. It just seems to be the guys up here throwing those bigger swim baits early morning, high tides will catch the odd bigger fish, but it is a hard game. You sort of get that 1 hour bite period on the high tide on the flats, and it tends to shut down. Especially having a lot of boat traffic on the flats up here, there's going to be plenty of boats fishing. You want to be doing that stuff early morning if that's going to be your choice, and then buggering off and fishing some plastics. I use a lot of power bait, I use a lot of gulp. I prefer gulp over power bait, unless it's really clear conditions where you get those translucent baits in power bait. So a new power bait Nemesis range, which we've got in 4 inch, 5 inch paddle tail baits, and then in a curl tail in 4 inch, 3 inch and 6.5 inch. I find they work really well in clear water systems. Just having that bit of translucent about the bait often helps me get a bigger bite. What else do we want to put out there? We've got a new range of shimmer shads as well this year. So our shimmer fork range, we do those in 65mm, 100mm and 120mm. Those guys there, good choice for deep water fishing. If you want to get down to the bottom quickly, they're weighted well, they get a really good reaction bite on. There's plenty of little dewies in the Urunga system as well, so we've got a couple of those over the last 4 years that we've been fishing it. And 2 of those fish last year come on the paddle tail version of our shimmer shads. And now we've got the fork tail version as well, so I've been using those a little bit more than the paddle tails, with some good new colours in those as well. And they come rigged with owner hooks, so owner trebles, nice, strong, sharp trebles. That's sort of my choice for a deep water bait if you're going to be fishing around the bridges, around those pylons or any of those deeper edges. I quite like the shimmer shads there. The the other story we've got is new Gulp Alive cap. So you want to tell the guys about why Gulp Alive is a bit more effective than your standard Gulp?
So Gulp Alive, basically Gulp Alive comes in a tub. We've got some over on the stand over here. Now Gulp Alive, the fluid that the baits are swimming in is actually a slightly different fluid to what you get in the packets. So it's got a hydration accelerant in it. So what happens is the baits will actually hydrate faster and more efficiently. So they'll actually be a bit plumper, a bit juicier. So they've actually got more, they'll end up with more scent in them. So what that does is gives you obviously a distinct advantage when that bait hits the water. If we were to put dye into that bait, to inject dye into it, you'd actually just see this cloud, this coloured cloud bleaching out of the bait as soon as it hits the water. If you look at power bait, the difference between power bait and Gulp, and Tim touched on it before, is presentation. Those nice translucent laminate colours where you have a distinct lateral line and a clear belly and a dark top, like you would see in good old Mother Nature in different baitfish species. Really cool and clear water, and really great to get a reaction bite. Now, once a fish grabs hold of it, he gets that taste and he thinks, oh, looks like, tastes like, I'm going to keep this in my mouth. Actually gives you time to set the hook, like we said. Now, Gulp Alive, I think, is the ultimate when it comes to soft lure fishing. It's got everything. It's got action, it's got scent, it's got flavour, it's got the whole box of dice. Yeah, it's at the pinnacle in my opinion. Really cool thing about it, take the lid off, pull the bait out, you can fish with your bait for a while, stick it back in while you're travelling from one spot to the next, and recharge the bait, let it rehydrate. You can also take your bag baits and put them back into the tub.
Yeah, it doesn't matter either, guys, if you're mixing colours with the Gulps, they don't bleed colours like other plastics and stuff will. So you can throw them all into one tub, whether it's a Gulp Alive tub or you use a bigger Tupperware container. You can buy the recharge juice to fill it up as well. They won't bleed colours like other plastics will.
So it's pretty cool. The way they develop the scent profiles is, at Spirit Lake we have a huge R&D facility, a big lab, lots of fish tanks. Like I said, we've got biochemists and marine biologists, and they'll actually test different scent profiles to see which one is the most effective on different species. And the way they do that is they just basically drop it into the tank and they'll test how long the fish actually holds it in its mouth for before it spits it out. The other thing that they'll do, they'll go and fish what they call Gulp plugs. So it's just like a dowel-shaped plug of Gulp. They'll take it to somewhere in a saltwater or a freshwater environment. It's got absolutely no action, but they'll actually throw it out on a hook or a jig head and see how many fish they can catch on it. And it'll be labelled A, B, C or D, and then they'll swap over. They correlate the scores for each angler, and they'll swap over. They'll test which scent profile is the most effective. The other thing that they do is actually test bait shapes or bait profiles to see how effective they are. Has anyone seen our Gulp shrimp, fish with our Gulp shrimp? Yeah? It's a pretty nondescript looking thing, isn't it? It's got no legs, just a couple of antennas and a little tail on it. So how they got to that shape was basically through a whole lot of testing where they actually had half a dozen different shapes. Some of them had a full assortment of legs, antennas, all the bits and pieces that you'd see a normal prawn or a shrimp. And then slowly but surely, they chopped them off. They kept dropping them in the tanks until they got to a point where they could work out which was the most effective shape, which one the fish liked the most. And guess what? The one without the legs, the stripped off version, the racing version, that was the one they liked the most. That's the one that hunts. So lots and lots of research, lots and lots of science. The formulas continue to evolve constantly, so they're always looking at the formulas, they're always looking at the scent profiles. So the scent profile on a shrimp will be different to the scent profile in a shad too. That's the other thing in a lot of cases, okay? So lots of science in it. When you think about, like Tim said, that clear water, getting that reaction bite, power bait, especially our new paddle tails and our new nemesis, they're showstoppers. They work really, really well. We're continually developing new products, so we'll have new stuff coming out in 2020 in both ranges. So can't really tell you a lot about that at the moment, but keep an eye out for it next year. We've got some really cool new stuff coming. Where to use it? Where do we find it? Lots of different places to go fishing in a river system, isn't there? And these river systems up here on the mid-north coast, I think, are outstanding. They're probably the best rivers on the east coast of Australia. I think, particularly in New South Wales. You guys are blessed in this area to have some outstanding rivers to fish, and some of the environments you find in them, you know, from rock walls to sandbanks to weed beds to, you know, sunken timber. Up the top end, you've got your gravel spits, and yeah, they're really cool rivers to fish. The cool thing is, flathead live in all those environments, and they're a strange species, flathead. If you go down to where we fish in Lake Macquarie, they almost exhibit pelagic sort of behaviour. It's weird. They'll actually follow the bait schools around, and it's become quite a well-known technique now to follow the bait schools around and fish soft fives and things under the bait schools in the lake to target flathead, and that's, you know, 20 years ago we wouldn't have even thought of doing it, but it's a well-known technique now. You know, and as the boys were talking about glide baiting and, you know, swimming big swim baits across the flats, it's very effective for them too. But to catch the numbers, I think any of those environments, if you fish your tides, think about where you're putting your lure. You know, rising tide, you want to be sort of getting up on the edges of those flats as the tide comes up, and you'll be surprised how shallow water some of these fish will be, and they really will get into shallow water at times. Pretty hard when there's a lot of boat traffic around, but if you put your lures anywhere near some structure, you know, whether it's rocks or weed along the edges where the break is, particularly on drop-offs where you've got current coming across the flat and then into some deeper water, they love that sort of bit of turbulence. It stirs a bit of food up. You'll find them along there. Sunken timber, one of my favourite spots to get them is in that tannin-stained water along the sunken logs on soft vibes and stuff like that. I've caught some really nice fish up here doing that sort of stuff. But you've just got to sort of work out the pattern on the day, cover a bit of ground, and if you find a patch of fish, just hold your ground and keep fishing it.
Boys have some pizza and stuff.
Yeah, let you have a few, guys.
Yeah, look, if anyone wants to come up and grab a couple of pieces of pizza and another drink and a hat, if you haven't already got one, do so now. Let's have a quick 10-15 minute break. Sit back down with your pizza and then fire some questions at these guys, and I'll try and answer them as best I can.
Is there a bin around here, Dane?
I don't think so.
When you said there was water.
Yeah, well, there's all second home.
Yeah.
Is it? Should just grab a box. It's your job.
Sorry?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Take some of the chair too.
I'm going to sit in this one. Oh, look. You think I'm a couple of these? Done well.
Where's your brother?
Still coming.
He's like, what do you want me to do? I was like, just cast it out, like, just hold the bottom of it. Yeah. You know, he's like, cast it out, see it, starts doing the call, and all of a sudden he's going, oh, yeah, I'm on. And like, sits there, he's like, starts talking, and he goes, well, we're actually pretty shipping. All of a sudden it just goes, yeah, I've got another one. We had to cut it out. Otherwise I'll go anywhere. Pretty much. It's the same colour. Same colour with a different dude. Do a charter. Yeah, no.
There guys, we'll get back into it. Let's talk a little bit about line and leader and hooks, G-pads. So in your opinion, what's the most important part of your tackle system? Line, knots. What's the first point of contact with the fish? The hook point, spot on. Absolutely, I'm going to rate that as the most important part of my tackle system, my hook point. You see the pros, every time they catch a fish, what do? Check the hook point. If you've rolled the hook point, guess what? You need to change it. Put the file over it, sharpen it up. Flathead, in particular, they're pretty hard-headed things. You know, the larger they get, the harder the top of their noggin is, the harder it hook through it. So you really want a nice, fine, really sharp hook point. If I can give you one tip tonight, it's use nice, fine hooks to target flathead. Makes a massive difference in the hookup rate, particularly when you've only got one hook point. Make sure it's a good one. Our Berkley Nitro jig heads, we have a couple of different sub-series within the Nitro range. The ones that we like to use for flathead are like the Stealths and the Brim Pros that have got a nice fine owner hook in them. So they're a very strong forged hook, nice and sharp. The owner factory is in Japan, really focused on quality control in that factory. The guys come and visit in Australia quite regularly, and yeah, we see a lot of videos of their quality control processes, and it's outstanding. They make very, very nice hooks. So we've got a wide range of weights and hook sizes to suit all different sort of size baits in our power bait and bolt liner. But my advice, as I say, is use nice fine hooks when you're targeting flathead, and just use the appropriate tackle. Make sure you can set that hook, and then you don't want to straighten it out, so you've got to do your bit to lash.
So you don't want to be using,
You don't want to be using ultra heavy line when Captain's saying use a fine wire hook. We've got 3 series of Brim Pro, the Stealths, and then the Saltwater Pros that go up in that thickness of gauge of hook. So I use the Brim Pros for anything up to about 10 pound braid, and then after that I'll go to the Stealth for anything from sort of 15 to 30 pounds. So I use the Stealths a lot on jewfish, snapper, when I'm using the smaller baits, 5 inch up to 7 inch, and then when I'm snapping fishing and I'm fishing heavier, I'm fishing shallow country where I want to pull the fish out from a bommy or some shallow reef. I often run the Saltwater Pros. Those guys, I've had 50 pound, going really hard on that and not had an issue with straightening hooks. But if you're going to run, 15 pound over a Brim Pro hook and really stick it to a flathead in the river here, you'll straighten the hook. So it's all about finding that balance of what line you're using, what leader you're using, so then what hooks you're using as well. And me and Captain, we both run X9, which is Berkley's 9 carrier braid. Really round, smooth braid, casts really well, super strong and fine for its equivalent diameter to any of its competitors. So really nice stuff. On the weekend, I don't think I'll fish much over 6 pounds, so I use a lot of 4 pound braid with 6 and 8 pound leaders on those super shallow flats in the clear water. And if we're fishing up any of the river arms and fishing some dirtier water, I'll be looking more at some 6 and 8 pound braid matched up with some 10 or some 12 pound managed leader. That'll be what I'll be using over the weekend. What about you, Cap?
Similar sort of scenario, guys.
I'll probably talk a little bit about lead. So lead is a really important part of your tackle system too. It's basically the bumper bar in your tackle system. That's what stands between you and all the nasty stuff in that fish for lifetime. So when you do finally hook that big fella or big girl, you want to have a decent leader, because flathead have a pretty keen habit of separating light leader if they're hooked a little bit down in the mouth. So Yeah, choose your leader wisely. It's like Timmy alluded to. It's a compromise to match the tackle that you're fishing with and the hook diameter that you're fishing with. Then it also comes back to your angler skill set, how hard you can actually pull on that and get business done landing that fish. But when it comes to leaders, we generally use around a rod length of leader, and we use what we call an FG knot. Is everyone familiar with an FG knot? It's not the easiest knot in the world to tie. I know my eyes are a bit average these days, and yeah, certainly struggle at times in low light, but most of the time you can sort of, after you get used to it and you practice it a fair bit, you can do it in remote control almost. The most technical bit's just finishing it off with some half inches or a risotto finish. But it is without a doubt the smoothest, knot to pass through the guides on the rod, and you'll get a lot less knots. And yes, particularly, I like to leave my knot off the bail. I don't wind it onto the reel. It's just a habit I've always had. Some guys will use a longer leader and they'll actually wind it onto the reel and the spool, but it's not how I do business. I normally have it, so it's just off the spool of the reel. Why is smooth line an advantage, do you think, when we're lure fishing?
Longer casting.
Spot on, longer cast. Why is a long cast an advantage?
Runs through smooth.
Yeah,
Cover more ground.
Yeah, you cover more ground, so your lure is in the water for a longer period of time. And also the fish is seeing your lure before it sees you or the boat, which is really important. You win another piece of pizza. So you get another piece of pizza, well done. So yeah, a lot of the time lure fishing, we're actually hunting, we're actively hunting, we're putting a presentation where we think in an area that's going to hold a fish. And if you can do that from a distance, your chances of catching a fish or getting a bite, firstly, are much greater. So long cast, smooth line, and it definitely makes a big difference when you have smooth line on the spool, particularly when it's windy or conditions are tough. You've just got your lure in the zone for a lot longer.
So does anyone know why we use fluorocarbon leader over just the normal mono leader?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they say like fluorocarbon has the same light reflective index as water, so therefore when it's in water it's not shining at a different rate, it's not reflecting light, and then it's obviously a lot harder than your standard mono as well. So you want that to keep you attached to the fish, and then having that line that's therefore invisible in the water is the other benefit.
It's dense too, so it sinks, as opposed to some monofilament sort of float. Fluorocarbon actually sinks quite well. And the abrasive resistance of it is fantastic. If you run it across something sharp, you can hang a weight on a piece of fluorocarbon, pull the weight up and down, and I'll bet you get twice as many sort of movements out of it as with most monofilament lines. So it's very abrasion resistant. So what other questions have we got, guys?
Hello, mate.
What have you got?
I've seen different blokes say different things. I've seen someone say like use heavier jig heads for flathead to keep it down the bottom. Another bloke say use a lighter jig head. So I'm in two minds.
I'll answer that with, you've got to think like a fish to catch a fish. It depends on the situation where you are. And I'll say one of my favourite ways to catch flathead at the moment is on top water lures, on surface lures. I love it, they're great. Has anyone caught a flathead on a top water lure here? How cool is it? They actually jump out of the water a lot, don't they? I think it's great. So that goes to show you, if you're in the right environment, you can fish very, very light and close to the surface. As you get deeper and it gets windier and you need to keep your lure down in the zone, then you go a bit heavier. So
I'd say to you as well, like I like to fish as light as I possibly can to have a real natural presentation on the bait. But you can be fishing in 10 foot of water and fish a 1/16th of an ounce, or you can be fishing in 10 foot of water with a bit of current and a bit of wind and be fishing a half ounce. Just depends on the conditions. But if you're fishing deeper water, I wouldn't go fishing a 1/16th because you want to be down in the bite zone and making your time out there as most effective as you can. And by having a slightly heavier jig head that gets to the bottom quicker in the bite zone is going to make you catch more fish.
good question. What else have we got, guys?
Alright, with the recharge stuff, is there any procedure in like the way you got to empty your old stuff out? Because I get like a slime on mine, and even when I recharge it with the new stuff, give it a month, maybe two. It just seems to have it. Should I be washing them off before I add any new stuff? Or?
You could wash them off if you wanted to. All it is the actual, the baits, because pitcher golf's a sponge, right? So it's actually, it's going to be in it anyway, but that discharge that comes out of the baits is actually what you're calling slime, you know what I mean? So over a period of time, you'll start to see that. But it's still fine, there's nothing wrong with it, yeah. So the answer is yes or no, you know what I mean? If you wanted to go to the length of doing that, you could, but you don't have to. Just keep topping it up, that's fine, yeah. And the recharge fluid is a really convenient way. If you've got a couple of golf alive tubs, just throw your bag baits in, throw some recharge fluid in, and you're in business. Stick them in the side pocket of your boat, and yeah, away you go. What else have we got, guys?
Yep. With jig head colour, is there any preference whether you get the colour ones or just the lead ones?
Oh, now we're opening up a can of worms. What's everyone's favourite bait colour?
Pink.
Pumpkin seed, pink. We talk about match the hatch. What is nuclear chicken? Come on. I've got to tell you, I reckon I've caught, I don't know how many fish I've caught on that colour. So look, I think there's days where I like to use coloured jig heads. Does it make a difference overall? Well, I'm not going to make a call on it.
I'll say, like, I do, not so much for flathead fishing, but like when I'm brim fishing, I'll use like a camo minnow grub, for example, in the gulps, and then I'll match that with a camo damn deep jig head. Yep. And I don't know whether it's in my head that I think it's more successful and I catch more fish, or whether it actually does. But if you do have a jig head colour that's, you know, matched to the bait colour, I would suggest using it. There's a lot of guys that paint them up. There's a tint paint that you can use to, the guys stopping here at FTA. There's pretty much every colour you want that you can just, you heat your jig head up with a lighter, you dip it in, and it sets almost instantly. So,
what I will say, if it gives you confidence as an angler, do it.
And that's what I was saying. Like, I don't know whether it does catch me more fish, or but I do prefer to use it where I can. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great call out. The whole confidence thing as an angler, if you back yourself, you're 6 parts there.
But you know when you rock up to a spot as well, and you know if it's a new spot, you'll give them 10 casts and you go, they're not here. If it's one of your spots, you'll give it 20 casts and you'll find the fish, right? Because you're fishing that spot with confidence. So it definitely helps you fish with confidence.
Good question. Anything else, guys?
With your retrieves, with paddle tail and curl tails, and that, do you swap up different retrieves?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, slow them down, speed them up. Sometimes it's a double hop. Sometimes, sometimes it's just a slow roll, depending if we're fishing in flat or something like that. You know what I mean? It might just be a slow roll, or even a bit of a burn and kill sort of retrieve.
I definitely fish a paddle tail differently to our fish a curl tail, if that's what you meant.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I'll have more of a slow roll with a paddle tail, just getting that tail working effectively. All paddle tails will work differently. Some work better at a higher speed, some work better at a real slow speed. So just watch that bait beside, if you're in the boat or off, just have a watch with it, see how that tail works more effectively, and then try and roll it at that speed. And then with a curl tail, I prefer more of a, couple of clicks, drop it back down, because that's working on the way back down then as well.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about baits. They've got that hydrodynamic action. Whenever they're moving forward, they're doing something. They're wiggling and shaking their good bits. So, whether it's a paddle tail or a curly tail or whatever it is, that inbuilt action.
Yeah. You see on some blokes, they just give it one big reef and let it go.
Like Tim said, I think, actually just watching what the bait's doing in the water and getting to know the cadence that it prefers to swim at its absolute best. Sometimes that's a cool thing to do. You think, okay, I'm at the right pace right now, you know what I mean? And some days the fish are just on the tube. You can find that you can cover a bit more ground a bit faster and still get bites because everything's on the tube. Yeah. Some days when it's quiet and it's hard, you've got to slow everything down a little bit. Yeah.
With the shimmer shads, the paddle tail and the
Fork tail.
Firstly, do you fish them differently?
I tend to fish the fork tails with more of an aggressive lift, so like a real fast lift. And I think they probably fish a bit better vertically as well.
Which ones?
The fork tails. And then the paddle tails, I fish a little bit slower just to get that tail to paddle at the same time the bait's vibrating. I let it sink longer as well because it takes longer to sink having that paddle tail. So it's paddling on the way down to the sink. So you need to give it more time to get down to the bottom again.
So can you cast and retrieve them as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And what would
They are designed for cast.
what would the retrieve be on the?
Just depending on the depth that you're fishing. So I know a lot of guys that fish them in like 6-8 foot of water in the smaller baits, the 65s and the 100s. That they'll throw them over 8-10 foot of water and just give them a real sort of. It's almost like they're slow rolling them,
Depends
It's like
what
a
you're
lift.
fishing for too, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there's plenty of guys that fish soft wives in shallow water that are successful doing that. Over flats.
Cool. Anything else, guys? Yeah, we'll hand over to the boys. Thanks for having us.
Alright, I'm going to ask Dale from Freshers Fishing Tours to come up. He's going to talk about how to break down an estuary like the Bellingenic lake, what he would do, and this guy spends a lot of time on the water down there with customers, so he has to get paid to put people on fish, so I'd like to think you know what you're doing. So yeah, same story, ask plenty of questions, and he's a wealth of knowledge and he loves answering questions, so fire away.
Thanks, Dane. Hey everybody, my name's Dale from Freshers Fishing Tours, like Dane just said. Good to be here, thanks for inviting me to come along. I've normally got a couple of little presentations and stuff that we can put up, but I'm just going to sort of wing it tonight because we don't have screens or anything available. So I'm sort of just going to wing it a bit. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shout them out, ask away, I don't mind. Boys from Berkley have covered so much, I don't know how I'm really going to have a whole lot to talk about, to be honest. They've covered a lot, but basically, first off, I'll just start with a brief little bit of background. So I have Freshers Fishing Tours. It's not a full-time gig for me, it's just something that I do on the side. And I do it just because I love fishing, I love being out on the water, and for a long, long time, I'd take people fishing and there was nothing better than seeing someone who, had only caught a few fish or never caught fish before, catch their first fish, and how exciting it was for them and how good that made them feel. And I just love that, so I basically just started doing it. It's not that easy, but essentially I just started doing it. So basically I've lived in this area on and off my whole life. I've been up here now permanently for over 15 years. So I've fished the areas like the Berkley Lane, a lot of the other systems around the area, but that's where I'm going to focus on because I'm guessing quite a few of you are here, for the weekend as well, fishing the Flathead comp. So, that's where I'll sort of talk a lot about because that's where I spend a lot of my time, is fishing those systems down there. Basically I've been in the area fishing for a long time, and my fishing charters just sort of came about because of what I love to do. I love fishing the freshwater and the estuary areas around this area, and that's where Freshers came from. So that's just what I do. One of the other things I've found with my trips that I run is the people that I cater to. Whether it's just a regional sort of thing, or I don't really know, but the people that I cater to, at least half, if not more, are people who are very new to fishing in general or fishing with lures, or they've never fished with lures or never caught a fish on a lure before. So because of that, I spend a lot of my time just showing people the basics, and I spend almost all of my time when I'm fishing with people just focusing on catching fish, not chasing trophies, not trying to show people the most crazy out there things that you can do, just focusing on putting fish in the boat. And because of that, I need to use proven techniques that I know work, that I have confidence in, and that I know are easy for people to learn, and that I know can be adapted to different areas, because if something's not working, I need to be able to go and change. I need to try and find fish. Because I can use that line all you want, it's fishing, that's how it goes, and everybody always like, yeah, I know, but in their head and be like, well, I don't get a bloody fish today. So I've got to be able to put people on the fish. So basically what I wanted to do was talk about flathead fishing in this area, the type of gear that I use, the gear, the locations, the techniques, those techniques and all of that stuff that I was just talking about, that is my go-to. It's my confidence thing, and it's the thing that produces fish for me more often than not. And don't get me wrong, I still go out on my own, or if I'm fishing with mates, and I try all the crazy stuff. I try fishing big stuff, I try fishing different areas, but if that's not working for me, even when I'm just fishing for myself, this is stuff that I still go back to, because this is what works and it is what gives me confidence. And like the boys said, the most valuable thing you can have in your fishing arsenal is confidence in what you're doing. If you don't have confidence in a technique, you're never going to catch as many fish on it as if you've got confidence in something else. So, because you just won't fish it as well, you won't fish it as effectively. If you pick up a lure that you've caught fish on every single time you go fishing, and you feel it with that lure, you know what to do with it, versus a lure that you've either never used before or you've maybe tried it a few times and you haven't been able to catch fish on it, I guarantee you're going to pick up that lure that you haven't used much or you haven't caught many fish on, and you're going to fish it, you're not going to cast it as well, you're sort of going to half-ass it a bit, and in no time at all you're going to be like, yeah, nah. And then you're going to pick up the bait or the lure that you do have confidence in, and you're going to put it in the exact same spot, but you're going to fish it slower, you're going to cast it more accurately, you're going to put in more time to it, and it's going to catch fish, and all of a sudden you're going to be saying, oh, well that lure works better. You had more confidence. The other one probably would have worked too. But basically, so what I'll start off, I want to try and break it down a little bit just into real basics. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, probably almost everyone here, has done a lot of fishing and fished with lures and stuff before. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm not trying to necessarily teach anything new. But one thing that I have found over a long period of time, and probably more so lately than ever before, is at times it can start getting a bit overwhelming. What's actually out there, and the lures, and where people are fishing and what they're doing, and all of the techniques, it can be really overwhelming. Like you think of the big bait thing right now. Think of it if you came in and you had never fished flathead before with lure, and you came in and you said, I want to fish flathead. You get onto YouTube or you pick up a fishing magazine, what are you going to see? You're going to see guys fishing 9, 10 bait plastics. You're going to see guys fishing massive big top waters, massive big swim baits, something that you'd expect to see on the front of some guy's boat out on a cod dam, and you're going to think, what the hell is going on? And they're not easy techniques, and don't get me wrong, they're good techniques, they work, and they do catch some big fish, but they're specific sort of techniques. They have a specific time and place, and you've got to put in a lot of effort, and it's that effort that a lot of the time you don't see when you pick up a magazine or you see some guy post a photo of his near meter fish. You don't see the times that he didn't catch fish and the hours he put in on the water not catching fish, and going home thinking, why did I just waste a full session throwing that top water all day or whatever. So that's the sort of stuff that, like I said, it's great for me to do it when I'm out on my own or when I'm with mates, but if I've got someone that has never caught a fish on a lure before, and all I'm thinking about is getting a fish on the end of their line and getting fish in the boat, I go back to the techniques that I know work, and a lot of the time it can be very valuable to remind people that those techniques are out there, and that's where I'm sort of coming from. Like I said, I'm not trying to say none of that stuff works and that's not how you should be fishing, because if you've done your time, you've caught plenty of fish and you want to try that stuff, that's great. But if you're maybe in a bit of a lull or you're new to it and you're not catching fish, going back to those real basics and just going back to techniques that you can trust will work can be a really good thing to do. So basically, what I'll talk about first is the actual gear, the actual outfits that I use. So the outfits that I use for those proven techniques are very light spin rods. I don't go too crazy. anything from like a 4 to 8 pound to a 6 to 12 pound spin stick, 7 foot long, with a 2500 reel on it is perfect. My favourite rod that I use for flathead fishing in this area is a 6 to 12 pound rod with a 2500 spin reel on it, 7 foot long. But it's only my favourite by a little tiny bit. And my very close second favourite is actually a 4 to 10 pound rod. It's quite light. And a lot of people are fishing much heavier stuff these days, and that light stuff I just find it's easier to cast, it's easier to fish long periods of time on the water. It's more comfortable. You can get better lure action, you can get better feel. Just everything about fishing that lighter stuff is good in my eyes. And the types of lures that I use, which I'll get to in a moment, are generally smaller than they are bigger. So I use a lot more smaller stuff. And like the boys said, I'm going to rehash a lot of what they said because it really rings true, especially in this area. No, our rivers here are not necessarily known as big fish rivers, but there are some big fish in there. But they're definitely known for, and they're not known for big bait either, but they're definitely known for small bait. There's a lot of small bait. So a lot of the lures that I fish in this area are small, and the biggest flathead I've ever caught are on small lures. So my biggest flathead in this area that I've caught is 84 centimetres, was on a Gulp 2-inch net. The second biggest flathead that I've caught is on an Eco Gear prawn, which is essentially the exact same thing. Just like the boys were saying, it's a little stick of Gulp. It doesn't look like much, but seems to work well in this area, and it's one of my favourites. But basically, so that's the sort of outfit that I like to use, a rod and reel. So 7 foot, 4 to 8, 4 to 10, 6 to 12, that sort of area. If you had to necessarily say just pick me one, I'd say go with the 6 to 12. It's still, depending on the model that you go, it's still a fairly, light, soft rod, easy to fish for a long period of time. But if you do come across that bigger fish, you've got a little bit more go there if you need it. But the other thing about it, which is more important than when you get the bigger fish, is the slightly heavier weights that it can cast. Gulp scented garlic bread, definitely. So yeah, if you had to pick one, that'd be it. Like I've always got heaps of gear on the boat, so I can always chop and change with slightly heavier, slightly lighter stuff. With the line, the most common size line that I use will be an 8 pound braid. I have some heavier stuff on some rods, I have some lighter stuff on others, but that flathead specific thing, 8 pound is what I use more than anything. A couple of my rods that I use a lot of flathead fishing, I'll have 10 on. But I like 8 pound, it's nice and thin, it casts an absolute mile, and honestly you'll never break it. Like if you break it, you've had a failure somewhere else. It's 8 pound braid in almost anything these days is near unbreakable in a straight line hook. So as long as you can tie a good knot and you haven't been unlucky with fish going around structure or something like that, you'd struggle to break 8 pound braid in a straight line hook. I use a lot of Power Pro. I've also started using a bit of this Berkley X9 stuff. I'm not giving it a plug just because the Berkley guys are here. I did start using it a couple of months ago. I've probably only got it on about a quarter of my rods at the moment, and I'm really liking it. So it's actually really good stuff. Like the guys were saying, talking about that smoothness to the braid, that actually makes a big difference. I love Power Pro because honestly I think its actual breaking strain and its abrasion resistance is way above what they actually grade it for. But it's not a smooth grade, it's actually a very rough grade. And there are times you notice it, like if I get 8 pound Power Pro on one rod exactly the same and put 8 pound X9 on another, this stuff has less resistance in the wind, less resistance in the water, casts nicer. So that's a genuine plug for that because it's good stuff. With the leaders that I use, I will normally use about 10 pound at a minimum in a fluorocarbon. Again, like the boys said, fluorocarbon has a better abrasion resistance, it sinks, which is ideal for chasing flathead. So 10 pound is normally as light as I go. Occasionally I'll fish a little bit lighter in the leader, but not very often if I'm specifically targeting flathead. And I'll fish anywhere up to about a 16 pound leader. But that all sort of depends on a number of different things. So if it's really clear water, middle of the day, if I'm maybe fishing flats, for example, and I'm seeing fish and I'm spooking fish and I'm not getting bites, I'm not getting any fish, they're the sort of times that I might start thinking about going to a longer or a lighter leader or both to see if that makes a difference. If I'm fishing low light periods, if I'm fishing at night, if I'm fishing deep water, and I'm specifically targeting flathead, I'll bump it up. I'll fish 12 or I'll fish 16 because you can get away with it. And you may as well, when you can get away with it, you may as well fish the heavy because if you get that good fish, you don't want to bust them up. So that's the sort of outfit. If I had to pick one outfit, that's the sort of thing that I'd be fishing. As for the locations that I fish, the locations and the lures, I could probably talk all night on, so I'll just sort of pick one and go. With the locations, there's absolutely tons of different factors that I take into it personally. But to break it down and try not to get too crazy with it and try and keep it simple, I can probably break it down to sort of 4 or 5 things. Those 4 or 5 things are the time of the day, the stage of the tide, the time of the year, the amount of rain we've had, and the last one, which I think is actually the biggest one, is my previous experience or my previous captures in certain areas. So basically, my previous experience, previous captures, that in my mind, that trumps everything. And it comes back to a number of things, probably that confidence thing more than anything. But if I've been fishing an area and I've been catching fish in that area, I don't care what my theories are on time of year or what my theories are on time of day. If I'm fishing an area and I'm catching fish there, I'll keep going back and I'll keep fishing. So that's why I say previous captures or previous experience is something that kind of trumps everything, because I won't put that aside and start thinking about other factors until that's not working. So if I'm fishing an area and it's been producing and I go there and I don't catch fish, that's when I'll start thinking of the other factors. So when those other factors come into it that I think about, the first two are the two that you can't really change. It's the amount of rain we've had, the time of year it is. So the actual location in a river, and I'm being very broad here when I talk about location. I'm kind of talking about, do you fish the mouth, do you fish the middle, do you fish way up the top? That's sort of where I'm getting at. So those two factors that you can't really change, you're never going to be able to change how much rain we've had. And look at it right now, we've had virtually no rain for ages. The little bits of rain we've had are doing nothing. So things like the salinity level in the water is a lot higher up the river systems than if we had had a lot of rain. So that's something that I'll think about. So if we've had heaps and heaps of rain, there's heaps of fresh in the water, I'll focus my efforts lower in an estuary system. I'll focus closer to the mouth of an estuary system. If we've had really dry periods, no fresh going into rivers, the fish will spread out and they'll move further up in the estuaries. And I'll focus my efforts in different areas further up in the estuaries. Good thing about that, when that happens, when you can focus your efforts, further up in the estuaries, you can generally start getting away from boat traffic and fishing pressure. And you can start getting little areas to yourself and not feel like you're fishing along a flat that 18 other people have drifted before you in the past hour. So the other thing of that is time of year. So with Flathead, like the boys said, it varies a lot from place to place because different systems, fish will act very differently. The same fish will act totally different in one system to they do another. But the general rule of thumb with Flathead, when it comes to time of year, during the cooler months, the fish will be fairly spread out through the systems. And then that amount of rain will sort of come into it. If there's been lots of rain, they might push down. If there hasn't been much, no fresh, they might spread right through the systems. If there's, during the spring months and when it starts warming up, so spring into summer, that's the time that traditionally theories sort of show that a lot of flathead will move down lower in an estuary system and they'll start hanging around, the lower halves of an estuary around river mouths and stuff to breed. Now, just like anything, they don't all do that. So it's not like during spring and summer there's no point going up a river because they'll all be down the bottom. There'll still be plenty of fish that don't follow the rules, so to speak. But there are a couple more factors that I can't change that I will take into account. So if it's spring, summertime, and there's been a bit of rain, I might focus lower in an estuary system. If there's been a bit of rain, if there hasn't been much rain, if it's really dry, I might, start venturing around a bit. During the cooler months, I will quite often start higher up in the estuaries to try and find fish. So then it sort of comes to the couple of things that you can change, and this is where I'll start getting into more specific areas to fish, not just a location in the river. The things that you can change, the tide cycle and the time of day. You can't change them specifically, but you can change the way they relate to you and your fishing. So, when it comes to the year or the rain, talking about the year, you can't just sort of say, oh, it's not the right time of year, I don't want to be fishing at this time of year, I'm going to not fish for 6 months. That's just stupid, because you want to be out there fishing as often as you can. But the time of day and the tide, you can definitely adjust your approach around those factors. So if there's a particular stage of the tide that you're liking that's producing fish, fish that time. If there's a particular time of day that you're liking, fish that time. If it's me, my times that I like more than ever are obviously early morning, late in the afternoon, and a tide change. Tide change is probably higher on my preference than the actual time of day. Tide change is my favourite time. Doesn't matter which one. The start of the run is my absolute favourite time, whether it be the start of the run out or the start of the run in. And that goes for a lot of fish that I target, definitely flathead. And then, time of day, obviously I like early morning, I like afternoon. The reasons I like them are not for traditional reasons of, you don't catch fish during the day. It's more for the thing that I think fish are harder to catch during the day because of external factors. They still bite if you can work out those factors, but you go down the river, middle of summer, middle of the day, there's going to be skiers, there's heaps of boat traffic, there's heaps of noise, there's heaps more birds moving around. All that stuff are going to make fish more cagey. Later in the day, you start getting a lot of shadows coming in over the water, you start getting less boat traffic, that's the time fish are going to start moving around, they're going to become more active. Same thing first thing in the morning, they've had a nice long period of quiet time, they've probably been moving around all night, they've probably been changing locations, they're ready to feed first thing in the morning. So, those times are productive for those reasons. It's not that you can't catch fish at other times, they're just the good times. So if you can focus your efforts on things like the tide changes around a morning or an evening, then you're laughing. But the other thing about that too is being on the water, I guarantee you'll catch more fish than if you're not on the water. So don't say, oh well, I'm not going to fish at this time because I can't fish later in the day and I'm not going to fish in the middle of the day because you said not to. If you can only fish at one time a day, go fishing. That's how you're going to catch fish. You'll catch more fish if you just go fishing and get time on the water as often as possible. As for the actual locations, like I said, tide is probably my number one factor of exactly where I fish and what I look for. And again, I'm going to try and break it down really simply, just to the things that I do that works for me. When I get that run-in tide, if I'm fishing the run-in tide, the start of the tide, I'll start looking for edges and sand flats that are going to start filling up with water. And I'll start fishing those sort of areas as the water is starting to fill up. Like the guys said about catching fish in really shallow water, you can catch some flathead in some absolute skinny water. Especially if you can get a run-in tide late in the day when it's starting to get dark and starting to get shadows, or first thing in the morning when the fish have had that time period, there's not a lot of light, not a lot of traffic on the water. So if you can get that run-in tide, basically fish edges, fish areas where that water's basically filling up. For the run-out tide, or the lower end of the tide, I will start focusing my efforts on drop-offs and deeper water. Areas where the water's maybe draining off those areas that are filling up. And I'll start focusing on things like rock walls and deep stretches of water adjacent to sand flats, things like that. Areas where fish, when that water's starting to get shallow on a sand flat, areas where fish can go and hide for a couple of hours while they wait for that tide to start filling back in again. So I'll focus on those sort of areas as well. The other thing I do look for, and it's definitely something that works in this area, is not so much that I think the fish are starting to become a pelagic state like what the guys sort of experience in some of the lakes down south, but the fish in this area, they definitely follow the bait. 100% they follow bait. And that's one of the things that I'll definitely look for. If I'm fishing an area and I'm not seeing any bait whatsoever, I will start losing confidence in that area pretty quickly. So bait is a real big thing for me. I do a lot of my fishing out of the boat, so I've always got my sounders available to me. It's not a luxury that everyone necessarily has, but if you have a boat and you have a sounder, or if you have access to, to someone who can take you who's got one, you'll, when you chase the bait around and when you look for bait using your sounder, you'll start to notice how big a difference it makes. Fishing around areas where the bait is always going to produce more fish. And the good thing is that the bait will show you areas where the fish are going to be as well, because the bait doesn't just hang out in an area for no reason. If bait is like in a big school just cruising up the middle of the river, it's normally there because it's either moving or it's being hunted to that spot. Bait will always hang in an area for a reason, and sometimes you might not realise what that reason is. You might find some bait that's just on a bank, and you might think it's just sitting there, there's nothing there, there's no reason for it to be there. I guarantee you there's a reason there. The reason could be as simple as a depth change or a deck bang, something that you might not be able to easily see and identify. I don't know if anyone's ever seen, there's some pictures that scientists did with bait fish in a bucket. I don't know if anyone's ever seen it, but basically they just take a white round bucket, no corners, no features in the bucket, absolutely nothing. It's just a white round bucket, and they put a little school of about a dozen bait fish in it. And when the bucket is just empty, the bait fish just mill around. They don't do anything. They all face different directions. They just sit there thinking what the hell are we doing. But then they do a number of different tests. They take a book and they put a book across just a tiny little edge of the bucket, and it just creates a little tiny bit of shade on one side of the bucket. And those dozen bait fish jam up hard into that little bit of shade that's created. And the other one was they took like half a dozen pebbles, like literally tiny little pebbles. You wouldn't think anything of it. And they put the pebbles in a pile on the bottom of the bucket. And all of those bait fish stacked themselves right on top of those pebbles. So it might be something that you don't even notice, but bait fish will hang there for a reason. Predatory fish will hang there for a reason. So bait is another big thing. And I'm sort of waffling on about the bait, but yeah, I do look for bait a lot, and that's one of the things that I'll really focus on as well when I'm looking for fish in general. Definitely when I'm looking for flathead. A lot of the time, fishing bait school, you'll find flathead sitting on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to sort of get into the lures and stuff that I use. I'll try and sort of roll through a bit because I'm really bad for just waffling on, and I'm sorry about that. I've got a few lures and stuff here that I want to show you. This is the stuff that I use myself. These are the go-tos that I've been talking about. I'm not going to tell you something that I don't think will work. I'm not going to say use this because I want to go over here and use something different. This is the stuff that I use. I use it. It's normally one of these things will be the first thing I tie on if I've got a charter or if I'm out wanting to fish by myself. But basically, I'll break it down a bit first and then I'll get into some specifics. You can literally go and fish the flathead with that one outfit that I talked about with 5 lures or less. And I'd almost put my name to it that you will find some success, you will catch fish. A deep diving hard body, a soft vibe, and a soft plastic. And when I say the soft plastic's the most technical that I'm going to get, and I'll say 3 different variations and 3 different weights. That's it. So if you can have a small plastic with a light weight, a medium-sized plastic with a medium weight, a bigger plastic with a heavy weight, a soft vibe, and a hard body lure. You've got 5 lures in your kit. I'd almost put my name to it that you'll catch fish on them. I'm going to talk about the actual lures that I use in those categories. And you can then sort of take from that, take your own spin on it, because honestly, everything works. There is a whole tackle shop in there, and everything works. Everything's got its day. So if you don't want to use one of these, I'm not saying you have to, but these are what works for me. So I'll start with the hard body first. A couple of my favourites I'll talk about this one first, because it's actually not one of my favourites, but it's absolute crazy in the marketplace. Almost everyone I speak to who chases flathead on the flats say that this is the absolute gun. It's a guy with double clutch. I don't use it that much. When I use it, I've caught fish on it, and I know it works. But that's just me. I'm just not a big fan of it. One of my favourites, not this colour, this is just what I grabbed off the shelf, but a jackal squirrel. It's an 80mm bait. Looks a lot like the little the bait fish that we get in the rivers around here. It's probably a little bit bigger on average than what we get in the rivers around here. But that's one of my favourites. They do a smaller one, they do some bigger ones, but that one's good. I like that. There's a couple others that I like. This one's the atomic Shiner Deep in a 75. Now that shape, that colour, everything about it. If you can find that bait that I was talking about in our rivers here, and that bait's a herring, and you can get one of these down to the bottom underneath that herring, I guarantee it'll work. I've never seen a hard body that looks so identical to the actual herring that we get in the river around here, other than this one. The shape, the size, the colour, it's just perfect.
What's that colour called?
Silver fox. Silver wolf, sorry. Silver wolf. So that's silver wolf in an atomic hearts. So they're really good. I like them. Like I said, I like the squirrel. That works really well. It's actually funny talking about the squirrel and talking about the low rain thing that I was saying before. I had a couple of guys, a couple of mates of mine from down the Central Coast. They come up and fish with me a bit, and they come up a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't that long ago, and they come up specifically to chase bass. That's all they wanted to do. They weren't interested in doing anything else. They just wanted to chase bass. So we went up one of the creeks here, and we specifically chased bass. And it's getting warm. Where should the bass be at this time of year? They should be moving up. They shouldn't be down anywhere. So that's where we went. We went right up to where we thought the brackish water was sort of starting, and we fished our way up from there. We got some cracking bass. We had an awesome session, getting a whole heap of bass for a couple of really good ones. I reckon we caught 3 times more flathead than bass. Most of them were between sort of 40 and 55 centimetres, so no monsters, but if you were fishing this weekend and you caught an absolute boat full of 40 to 50 centimetre flathead, you'd be stoked. And it was all on squirrel. Not all, but probably 3/4 of them was on squirrel. The others come on a few different plastics and a few other things, a few of these sort of things. But that is because, in my opinion, because of that high salinity level, because of the low rain. That salinity level's moved way up the river. Those flathead have just spread right up the river. So that then throws one theory out the window, doesn't it? So you've got a theory that fish are going to move down to a certain area at a certain time of year, but some other factor just completely made it null and void. And the fish were right up in, honestly, what I actually thought was fresh water. Turns out that it wasn't. So with the soft bite, that's the next one I want to talk about. My favourite is the Samaki Vibalicious. A close favourite, again, it's not just because the guys are here, but a close favourite to this, close second, is the Shimmer Shad, the Berkley Shimmer Shad. One of the reasons I like the Shimmer Shad over the Vibalicious, honestly, it's a pretty standard reason that'll be true for everyone, it's cheaper. If I'm putting it into the hands of someone that I don't know if their next cast's going to go up into a tree, cheaper lure is always higher on my books. So if it's me, my first go-to soft bite's always a Vibalicious. They make 2 styles, similar to the Shimmer Shad. They make a vibe tail, they make a fork tail. Just like what the boys said about the Shimmer Shads, is very similar for the Vibalicious. I just realised I didn't talk too much about the techniques, so I'll have to get to some techniques. So basically, with the Vibalicious, I like the 70mm ones. They were my favourite. That's before the 85mm came out. So the 85, I think, flathead wise, is going to be a better size. It just matches the herring bait that we get here in the river a lot more. So yeah, I like that 85, but yeah, 70, 85, even if you wanted to fish the bigger ones, they'd still work. The actual techniques that I use, I noticed you asked about the fork tail versus the thumper tail or the vibe tail in the Vibalicious. So the technique that I use will vary a little bit. I fish the Vibalicious more often for deeper water stuff, where I want to make a nice long cast, get the lure down into that deeper water and just really cover ground. They do definitely work in shallow water. I don't fish them as much in shallow water. That's just me. It's just the way I fish. But they will definitely still work. If I was fishing in shallow water, I go the thumper tail first. And if I'm fishing deeper water, I'll go the fork tail. The reason for that is simply because the fork tail sinks a little bit quicker and it gets down a little bit quicker to the bottom. I can spend more time on the bottom where I think the flathead are. When you hear people talking about catching flathead on top water lures and coming up and getting them on, that's more often than not shallow water stuff. It's visual for the fish. You might be fishing in 1.5 meters or less water, and you're fishing the top water. The fish is coming up to eat it because they can see it. If you're in 6-8 meters of water fishing top water, flatheads sitting on the bottom aren't going to come up and see it. They're not going to come up and eat it because they can't see it. So you've got to be down there where they are. So yeah, I'll fish the fork tail for getting down and fishing that deeper water. The way I'll fish them will vary from each one, and it'll vary on the depth of the water as well. When I'm fishing that fork tail in deeper water, I'll use a very short, aggressive lift, where I basically just lift the rod tip quickly but shortly, just until I feel it vibrate. That's all I'm looking for. I'm just feeling for that split second of vibration of the lure, and then I stop. I'll drop the rod tip back down so that lure can go back down, and then I'll do that again. I'll do that all the way back to the boat. But I'll mix it up as well. If I'm doing that and it's not working, every now and then I'll start throwing in something different. I'll do a slow lift that's basically just fast enough to feel the lure vibrate. Or I'll do a lift and I'll add a couple of little flicks in, and I'll mix it up a little bit. But what I go back to in between changing it and trialing different things is that technique of just the lift, so it's just going and then staying on the bottom. One of the things that you'll notice that if the fish are eating on the drop, which flathead do quite often, you can cast a lure out and let it sink down, and you'll see your line twitch, or you might get a bite on the drop, and you might miss the fish. You can then work that lure all the way back through the water and not get another bite, not get any more interest. Cast the lure back out, get another bite on the drop. So when you can identify days like that, the fish are sort of biting on the drop, that's an instance where I might vary up my retrieve, and I might specifically do a long, slow lift and then drop my rod tip back down with a heap of slack line to create that drop. So I'm not fishing a drop retrieve technique only on the initial cast. I'm fishing that drop all the way back to the boat. So that's an instance where I'll change it up. With the thumper tail, with the vibe, because it sinks a little bit slower and it actually swims at a slower speed, that's where I'll fish that in a little bit shallower water, and I won't fish it as aggressively. I'll fish it a little bit more subtly. Sort of slower lifts, I'll incorporate just a slow roll. I'll try and keep it in the bottom and just sort of maybe lift it up a foot off the bottom and slow roll it along. But more often than not, with that soft vibe, whether it be thumper tail or fork tail, that retrieve where you've basically got it on the bottom and you're just giving it that little lift, just enough to feel the vibration and drop it back down, that's what works more often than not for me. With the hard body, I didn't really talk much about the technique for the hard body. I honestly don't fish hard bodies as often as I fish a lot of other lures. And it's probably, again, because when I'm chartering it, it is a lot easier for a lot of people to fish plastics. And like I said, a hell of a lot cheaper too. So if you're losing them, losing a few plastics doesn't hurt as much as losing a hard body. But the technique that I use is fairly standard. I'll normally fish them in water no deeper than what the lure is intended to dive to, because again, I'm focusing on that bottom section of the water column where the flathead are sitting on the bottom. So if your lure can't get to the bottom, or at least get close to it, you're not going to have as much success. So I'll try and fish no deeper than what the lure will actually dive to. And the way I fish it is a pretty stock standard slow roll. So I'll try and cast as far as I can. If I'm fishing, say, a sand flat or a weed edge or a weed bank, I'll try and cast as far as I can. I'll try and set myself up if I can, so I've got the wind behind me even. Get a really long distance cast. That'll help you to get that lure down deeper as well. Get that lure down to the bottom until you can feel it basically running along the bottom. You want that lure basically kicking along in the bottom, disturbing a little bit of sand. Sometimes it might catch up on a bit of weed. If you feel that happen, you can normally just give your rod a couple of quick grips and that'll clear some of the weed. And then you can go back to your retrieve. So if you can just do a slow roll, getting that lure down to the bottom, just bumping along the bottom, every now and then you can incorporate a little twitch, or you can incorporate a pause. So if you've got a floating lure like one of these, for example, you can basically be running that lure along the bottom, and then every now and then you can give it a big twitch and that lure will go, and go back to the bottom. And then you can give it a pause and that lure will just stop. It might go like this, and then you can start it again. Start running back down the bottom. All things like that will all get fish's attention. If you ever watch underwater videos of people with troll cams and stuff of a lot of fish, and flathead do it just as much as so many other fish out there, you get a hard body and run it along the bottom, you'll be amazed how often there will be fish just ghosting that lure, just swimming along behind it. They might have no intention of ever eating it, but they're just swimming along because they're curious. It's something different. They just want to see what it is. So many times, something like a pause will be the thing that makes a fish bite. And the reason I think it is, and I've heard other people say the same thing too, I think it's a really good theory. If you're just doing a slow roll and that lure's just running along the bottom, you might not know what's going on down there, but there could be a flathead swimming along behind it. Let's just say there's a flathead, he's swimming along 6 inches behind it, because he's really curious, he's interested, doesn't really know what it is, but he knows it looks fishy. So he's cruising along, you're cranking it along, all of a sudden you pause it. What happens? He just runs straight into it. He's got no choice. And out of instinct, if that happens, what's that fish going to do? It's instantly going to open its mouth and have a go at it. It's an instinct thing. So many times that you'll be slow rolling and you'll just do a pause, and all of a sudden, bang, you'll feel the bite. So that's the way I'll fish a hard body. It's pretty stock standard for flathead. It's not really anything special. With the plastics that I fish, so like I said, I fish a small plastic, a medium-sized plastic, and a bigger plastic. And when I say big, I'll start with the bigger one first. When I say big, this is my idea of big. It's a 4-inch Kitech Easy Shiner. They do a 5-inch one as well, which I love, and I fish that a lot as well. But it's normally as big as I go, unless I'm doing something different, like if I'm on my own fishing it, trying to catch monster fish on a swim bait or something. But when I'm just out to catch fish and put fish in the boat, that's my big lure, a 4-inch Kitech Easy Shiner. My medium-sized lure is a 4-inch Gulp Minnow. Don't worry about the colour, this one just happens to be smelt, but any colour will work. But it's a bit of an in-joke for Dane. I absolutely love smelt, and Dane's always giving me a hard time about it. My like backup stock on the boat of 4-inch Gulp smelt is like half a dozen packs. If I run below that, I'm like, shit, I need some more. So that's like my medium lure, and it's my go-to. So if anybody wants to know what my go-to is, if you came on my boat and went into the estuaries here and said, put a lure on the end of my rod that you have absolute confidence in that I'll catch a fish on, that's what I'd put on first. If I'm trying something different, or if I'm matching bait, or if I've seen something else happen, different story. But if that was the scenario, I absolutely had to go and catch a fish, that's what I'd put on. My small lure can be one of a number of different things, but it's any type of small grub around the 2 to 3 inches, 2.5 inches. A Gulp jigging shrimp is one of my favourites. It's 3 inches long. It's the body of a 2-inch shrimp, which the boys have spoken about, but it's got a little telltale on it. That's probably my favourite. The only thing about it is the fish really do love them. One fish that absolutely annihilates them constantly is brim, and they don't last very long. So they're not the most cost-effective thing, but honestly, I'd never go to the guys and say, hey, you need to change it, and because the tails tear or the fish chew them up too easy, because if they're getting chewed up, it's because fish are eating them, they work. And I know that sometimes you'll come across, you might come across one that feels a little bit stiffer than the others. I don't know why, it might just be something to do with manufacturing, could be anything. And a lot of the time I'll notice that the really soft ones will work a lot better. It's obviously to do with that action. Another one that I like is squidgy wrigglers. These are actually 100mm ones. I didn't mean to grab the 100, I actually meant to grab the 80. The 80mm squidgy wriggler is one of my favourites for a small soft plastic. Now, I'm going to get to some techniques in a sec, but I'm just going to cover the jig heads. When I say 3 different jig head weights, if you can just get 3 different jig head weights, that'll cover you for almost any situation that you're going to find in the river here. You don't have to fish super heavy here. One thing about our rivers, talking about the Bellinger and the Culane specifically, if you know the rivers, or if you're going down there on the weekend and you're going to explore, yes, you'll find some deep areas. There are some very deep areas in the river. But on average, if you drive those rivers top to bottom, on average, you'll be finding 3 to 5 metres tops. So you don't need to be fishing massive, big, heavy weights. And the flow in the rivers, to be honest, is quite hindered at the moment with a lot of the sand flats and sand build-up at the front. So we don't have too many situations here where we've got like ridiculous flow that you just can't deal with. So you don't need to fish super heavy around here. So the weights that I like to fish, my 3 go-to weights for flathead is a 1/8 ounce, a 1/6 ounce and a 1/4 ounce. Now again, it just so happens, not a plug, but it just so happens that Nitros, the guys from Berkley, they thought the same thing, and they created an actual pack of jig heads that has those 3 exact weights in it on a 2/0 hook, which is absolutely ideal for almost any of these plastics that I've spoken about. So you could literally grab 1 packet of jig heads that gives you 3 weight or depth variations or technique variations. You could grab 1 or 2, like honestly, you could grab 1 packet of these plastics, and all of a sudden you've got 3 different fishing scenarios that you can cover. Now, the real basics of that is lighter weight for shallower water, lower water current, medium weight as an all-rounder. If you're fishing maybe a couple of metres of water, maybe shallow water with a bit of current, you might bump it up to that medium weight. If you're fishing deeper water, something that's maybe over 5 or 6 metres and you want to get down a little bit, go up to that, that heavier weight. But it will be different everywhere you go. It'll be different every depth, every bit of water current. You might be fishing one side of a bank that's got a big eddy in it. You might be fishing 8 metres of water, and the water might be current behind you, but you might be fishing behind a big tree or something, creating an eddy. The water might almost be still in there. You might be able to downsize and fish lighter. You might then turn around and want to fish the opposite bank, which has got current ripping along it. You're going to have to fish the heavier weight. So you could literally be standing in one spot and want to be able to make that change to fish more effectively. And that's one of the other things, one of the other tips that I definitely has. Don't be afraid to make little changes like that. One thing I see a lot of people do, and I reckon that I am probably worse than anyone for it, is I get really set in my ways. I'll get really set on something, and sometimes I'll get really stubborn about changing. I won't want to change, and that can really cost you sometimes. Don't be afraid to change and make little adjustments in your technique. As an example of that, of how much difference that can make. If you're fishing a bank, the rivers that we've got down here, if you take the Bellinger River down here, you've got lots of long banks that are tree line, snag, sandy bank, that are just a mellow drop down into deeper water. So over the course of 20 or 30 metres, they might just drop from a couple of foot or a metre depth harding up against the bank down to maybe 4 or 5 metres. Now, fish could be sitting anywhere in that area, depending on those factors: time of day, time of tide. If that tide's running in, those fish might be hard up in that edge because there might be mangroves. They might be wanting to get up into those mangroves and see what they can eat. If the tide's running out, or if it's the middle of the day and the sun's high, those fish might move out into that deeper water. They might sit there because there's, that edge up there is where they want to go later in the day or when the tide changes. So they're just going to wait it out in the deeper water. Those fish will still bite. So if you're sitting out off that bank, you don't really know where those fish are, what they're doing. You've got a bit of an idea, but to be honest, those fish could be sitting right up in hard. They could be out deep for whatever reason. what I'll normally do is I'll fish a light jig head, and I'll put that light jig head up into right up hard into the bank. And if I don't get fish hard up in the bank, I'll keep fishing that jig head all the way out. And I'll just fish it slower and slower to keep it down on the bottom. And I might get a bite out on the bottom. Now, if I'm lucky enough to get that bite, that's great, because I'm probably fishing a really light jig head. It's probably not down there on the bottom fishing that stretch of water as effectively as I could be. But let's just say I got the bite, and all of a sudden I went, hey, I've got a bite, or I've got a couple of bites out here off the bank. I've been casting right up into the bank, but all the bites I'm getting are out here. I'll make a simple change and just go slightly heavier in the jig head. I'll still cast that heavy jig head up into the shallows, and I'll cast it up into those shallows just on that odd chance that there could still be fish there. But I'll fish it all the way back out, and just one little simple change, I'm fishing that stretch where I've identified that I've gotten a bite and I've gotten some fish a lot more effectively. Instead of having a little light jig head, maybe just getting the first section of deep water where some fish were sitting before I pulled it up through the water because it was too light, I'm now fishing all the way, and you might then get more bites. And that will work in reverse as well. You might think that fish are sitting out deeper, or you might work your way along that bank and keep fishing that heavy jig head. And because you're fishing it up hard into the edge, you might throw it up there one time thinking, I'm just putting it up there to start my retrieve. This area here in front of me out deeper, out wider is where I'm focusing, but you might throw it up in there and get hit straight away. And you can then say, okay, something might have changed. Has the sun moved? Is there more shadow in this area? Has the tide changed? And water's starting to move up. You can then make that change and fish a light jig head. And just like what Timmy said, it's a really good point that Tim made. I fish as light as I can get away with for what I'm trying to achieve. So if I can fish an area of the water or a particular depth range, and I can fish it effectively with a lighter weight, I'll go a lighter weight. If I need to fish a heavier weight to get down because I want to stay on the bottom longer, or the current's running and every time I lift it, it gets moved 3 meters through the water instead of three feet, I'll go heavier to stay in that zone longer. So I'll fish to the conditions, but I will go as light as I can get away with. So the actual techniques that I use, again, they're pretty stock standard techniques for fishing soft plastics. The first thing that I didn't say with the soft bite, but this is what I do with the soft bite as well as the plastic. It's actually what I do for any sinking lure that I'm wanting to fish on the bottom. It's the technique for actually knowing that you're on the bottom. Does everyone know what the technique is? Does everyone know the technique watching your line? Slack line? Yeah? So sometimes it can be hard. If you've got a lot of current or a lot of wind, sometimes it can be hard, and you might need to run some little tests on the side to get a bit of an idea in your head how long it maybe takes you to lure to get down. But if you don't have too much current and not too much wind, and you can watch your line, watching your line's a big thing too. This is something else I didn't say about line. That stuff that's white, I love the fact that it's white. I love the yellow Power Pro because I can see it. My eyes aren't flash. I have to wear glasses as it is. But even if I had the best eyes in the world, if you've got 4 or 5 people all fishing on your boat, or if you're watching your line, watching for bites and movements, being able to see it easy will make a huge difference. So bright coloured lines. That's just me personally. So basically, what you want to do, that technique for seeing or knowing your lure's on the bottom. You want to cast it out. Now, you can do this with a tight line or a slack line. The way it actually happens will vary a little bit depending on whether you're doing it with a tight line. And so if you've got a tight line, if the lure hits the water on a tight line, that lure is going to sink on an angle back towards you, which is perfect if you're fishing, say, a rock wall that goes into the water on an angle. If you're fishing a deep bit of water and you want that lure to sink straight down, you want to let it sink on a slack line. So a slack line, the lure will be able to just go straight down. And when I say slack line versus tight line, I'm talking about holding the line or bail arm closed versus bail arm open and letting line just go out. So basically, whatever way you're doing it, whether it's slack line or tight line, if you watch that line, and I'll talk about the tight line version first because it's a little bit easier to identify. So if you watch that line as your lure's sinking, when you've got your line tight, the line coming out of the tip of the rod will be under tension. It won't be tight like something's pulling on it, but it'll just be under a slight bit of tension. It'll be straight. It might have a slight, parabolic curve to it, but it won't be slack. It'll have some sort of tension on it. When the lure hits the bottom, it'll be really easy to see, especially if you've got a nice bright line. That line will go from having a bit of tension to relaxing. And you'll see the line go, just like create this little belly. When you're doing it on a slack line, say an open bail arm, you'll kind of be looking for two things. You'll be looking for the line pulling across the surface of the water, creating little V's, and you'll still be looking for the line from the tip of the rod down to the water. So when the lure is sinking, you'll see the line pulling. You'll see it pulling through the water with a little bit of tension on it. The lighter the lure, the harder it'll be to identify. The heavier the lure, the harder it'll be to identify too, because the lure will sink so quick, sometimes you might miss it. But fishing these sort of weights, it'll be pretty easy to identify. You'll see that line with a little bit of tension, and when that line goes slack and relaxes, or when that line stops pulling on the surface of the water, that's how you know your lure's on the bottom. And you can use that technique all the way back through your retrieve. I don't use that technique just on that initial cast. I use it all the way back through my retrieve. So if I'm fishing a vibe or if I'm fishing plastic, I'll give it a flick or two flicks or however many flicks I give it. I'll drop that rod tip back down and I'll watch that line. I won't just assume that the lure's gone straight back to the bottom. I'll watch that line and I'll wait for my cue, my signal to say that lure's back on the bottom now, go again, or pause, or whatever it is that I'm doing in that technique. So use that technique all the way back to the boat if you're wanting to fish on the bottom. If you're wanting to play around with your retrieve and start doing things a little bit different, like keeping your lure just off the bottom or keeping it at a certain depth, you can start playing around with that technique and you can use it to your advantage throughout your retrieve. So let's just say that you're fishing the vibe. Let's say you're fishing the thumper tail and you don't want to lift the thumper tail vibe up and down. You want to slow roll it through a bit of deep water, just for something different. What you want to do is you want that thumper tail to be 1 metre off the bottom. You want to just be slow rolling it 1 metre off the bottom in 6 metres of water. What you can do is you can go into some shallow water and it'll only take you one single time to do it. You don't even need to do it in shallow water. You can just do it beside the boat or right in front of you. Get your metre of water. Drop the lure into the water under a slack line and just give yourself a little time cue of how long it takes to sink. And what you can do is you can use that sinking technique, get your lure on the bottom, and then wind it up, start your retrieve, and then pause it, count how long it takes to get back to the bottom. If you drop that lure in the water beside you, and you know that it takes 2 seconds, soft vibe's probably going to be a hell of a lot quicker, but let's just say for making it easy, 2 seconds that lure takes to sink 1 metre through the water column. If you wind it up through the water, and you then stop it and slackline it and let it sink, and it takes 5 seconds to sink to the bottom. You can say to yourself, okay, that motion that I did actually lifted that lure up to 2.5 metres. I don't want to be at 2.5 metres. I want to be at 1 metre. So you can do one of two things. You can do the exact same motion, but you can wind it slower, so it doesn't pull up through the water as high. Or you can wind it faster, but stop sooner. So you can use those techniques and you can check yourself along the way. So you might do a massive big long cast and you can work that lure back 10 metres through the water, stop it, let it sink, count it down. If you find yourself getting up too high in the water, higher than what you want to, letting it sink or get back down. So there's lots of little techniques and things like that I do all the time. More often than not, I do it without even realising. I'll just be fishing away and I won't even know what I've been doing, but I've just been doing these little techniques, just rolling through the motions. But getting back onto the retrieve, I'm just rambling in here. Getting back onto the retrieve with soft plastics, like I said, a lot of the time it's very similar to the soft white. I'll just do little hops along the bottom, especially if I'm targeting flathead. I'll sink that lure down to the bottom and it'll just be a little hop. The differences are, if I'm fishing something small with a little tail on it, a little curly tail or a grub, I'll fish a lot more delicately, a lot slower. And I might still do little hops, but they might not be aggressive hops. They might just be little gentle lift and drops, and allow that tail to do a lot of the work for me. If I'm fishing something like the 4-inch minnow, because it doesn't do a whole lot in the water, if you just slackline it, that sink, it just plummets to the bottom. I'll fish that a lot more erratically. So I'll do that same, just little hops, but I might just, it won't be a delicate little hop, it might be like a 1, 2, 3 flick, and then rod tip back down, let it sink back down at the bottom. Or I might do that one really big lift and allow the lure to sink back down because I've noticed that I was getting hits on the drops. So I'll mix it up, but that one retrieve, if I was going to say the one retrieve that I use with that lure, it's just the sink to the bottom, hop, 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 sink back to the bottom. Pause, hop, 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 sink back to the bottom. And you can do those, you can mix it up constantly. And you can do those hops in a short period of time. You can do them in a short distance, a long distance. And just keep varying it up. And eventually, something will start shining through for you. You'll start identifying things that work for you, things that you do that catch fish, and you can just start replicating, keep doing it. With the Kitech, I'll do hops, but I do fish that a little bit more delicately again when I'm doing the hops. But more often than not, I'll do a variation of a slow roll with pauses. Just because the action on the little paddle tail is so good, these things are really soft. They're another one that, honestly, the fish go through them a bit, but they work a treat because they're so soft. They've got a really good action at a nice slow speed. And again, coming back to something that Timmy said that he touched on, different lures will work differently in the water. And you need to do your testing, do your research and work out what works. Work out what you like. You might not like fishing fast. If you don't like fishing fast, there's no point fishing a lure that you have to fish fast to get it to work. Because you're going to be fishing it slow, because that's the way you like to fish, and the lure's not going to be working, or it's not going to be working as well as quickly. So make sure you identify what your lure does, watch it in the water, work out what it does when you can see it, and then translate that into your retrieves where you can't see it. But Kitech, for example, it's a lure that works really well at a slow speed, and I like to fish it nice and slow. So yeah, a slow roll, using that technique that I said, that's actually the reason why I touched on that technique about getting a lure at a certain depth and keeping it there, because that's something I do with that particular lure all the time. I'll sink it to the bottom and I'll be fishing it on the bottom, but the technique I'll be using will be that slow roll. And the slow roll technique slowly pulls the lure up through the water. So I need to be able to identify what I have to do to keep that lure roughly in a depth where I want it. If I just keep going at a constant pace and never stop, that lure is just going to eventually keep coming up all the way back to me. Now, if I want to fish that lure 1 metre off the bottom, if that's where I think I'm going to get the strike, there's going to be a short period where the lure is sitting on the bottom where it's not where I want it. Then there's going to be a short period where it's right where I want it, but then there's going to be a massive, big, long time where it's not where I want it. And I'm going back to that thing, I'm not fishing effectively. So that little technique of adjusting your speed and your lifts and checking yourself by knowing how fast your lures sink and using those tips to keep a lure in strike zone, that's why I touched on that, because that lure is what I do with that. I fish it on the bottom, but I don't drag it through the bottom. I fish it with a technique of slow rolls and pauses that keeps it just up off the bottom, roughly where I want it. So that's the technique that I use for those. Is there any questions on any of those techniques? Is there anything that I can sort of elaborate a little bit further? Anything that I said that didn't make sense? Sure. Okay. Well, one other thing I wanted to touch on, because I know the question about colour was asked, and I just want to reiterate what Tim said. My personal opinion on colour is it means a lot more to us as fishermen than it does to the fish. But in saying that, if you ask me what my favourite colours are, I'll still tell you, because I have favourite colours. I have favourite colours that I like because they're my confidence base. I liked what Tim said about the jig head colour, and having your jig head colour match the colour of your plastic. I think that makes a lot of sense. And there's a reason that makes sense to me. Does anyone listen to any fishing podcasts? Yeah, 1, 2. So we're not all into the whole podcast thing. I'm not really into it. But there's a bloke that does a podcast. His name's Greg Bond. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. But if you get a chance, if you're interested, you should have a listen. He interviews a lot of people and very interesting listening to his interviews on people. But the man is an aquatic scientist. And he doesn't study fish as such in his work. He studies science relating to water and aquatics. But he's an outgoing fisherman. So he uses his knowledge and he does a lot of studies. Now, he absolutely blew me away with his information on colour and what fish can actually see. Now, there's a lot of research out there. Now, I won't be able to describe it in real specific detail because I'm not a scientist and my mind's just not that way here. But to put it really bluntly, based on what science shows about humans and what we can see and the makeup of our eyes, and then referencing that to the makeup of a fish's eyes, and basing what a human sees versus what they can theorise that a fish sees. In your eye, there's a whole heap of different types of cells. They call them cone cells and rod cells. Basically, the different cells do different things. One of the types of cells is what differentiates colour. And the other type of cell is what differentiates the shade of the colour. So, in your eye, and using the human eye has lots and lots of the cells that sees colour. And it has nowhere near as many of the cells that see shade. So, if I look at that wall, I can see it's blue, and I can identify that that's blue, and I can identify that the picture of the kayak is orange, and the water up on that one's kind of green. Now I can see those different colours. But when I look at that blue, if you got right up on it with a close microscope, as you go across that blue, there might be hundreds, if not thousands, of different shades in that blue. I don't see any of them. All I see is blue. A fish, when they look at a fish's eye, it's the opposite. It doesn't have very many of those cells that sees colour, but it's got absolutely bucket loads of those cells that see shades. So what they can theorise from that, based on what a human sees, is that a fish doesn't see colour as much, but what they can see in colour, so a fish might just see shades of greys, and they might have particular cells, because within those little cell groups, different cells are specific for different colours. So they might have cells that see a specific colour really well, and they might not see any colours at all. So all the other colours, they just see grey. But what they do see, and way better than what we can ever imagine, is shades and contrasts. So if you've got a bait fish in the water that's silver on the bottom and has a dark back, it might not matter what colour that back is. It might not matter what colour the belly is. But that fish sees a really clear definition, a really defined a difference in the contrast between one and the other. And then if you relate that to something like a lure that's got a really defined contrast to its colour, that's why things like patterns on lures can work so well. Doing simple things like drawing little lines on your lures, drawing gill plates. You know, you might draw some gill plates, or you might pick up a lure. That's a little habit, but you might pick up a lure, and it's got this really defined red gill line painted onto it with blood coming out the side. You might look at it and you think, that looks cool. That looks injured. That looks like something's going to eat it because it's easy. In the water, the fish might not see the red at all. He doesn't care about the red, but the contrast is what he sees. So that's just what I wanted to say about colour. Like, I don't think colour is that big a deal, but I definitely think contrast is. So if you can see bait, going back to that bait thing, if you see bait in the water and you can see certain patterns or certain shades. So let's say if you like, what's a good example in the river? A little blackfish. Let's just say a little blackfish in the river. You wanted to get a lure and you had a theory in your head that you saw a flathead, or you saw a flathead come up and boof a boof a blackfish over the top of this sand flat, and all of a sudden you said to yourself, I need to get a lure that looks like a blackfish, and I need to go and fish that area. Don't stress so much about colour. Try and find a lure that's the right size, the right shape, and has those bars on it, like what a blackfish has. So think about things like that. But like I said, in saying that, I've got my favourite colours, and I'll always use my favourite colours because that's what gives me confidence. But I can definitely.
Doesn't matter what colour it is.
It doesn't matter what lure it is as long as it's got 4-inch knot. But if you I know I talked about the colour on this one, that silver wolf colour, and I made a big deal about how much that looks like a herring, and I made a big deal about the colour. But the thing is, it's not so much the colour. The colour's not the first thing. It's the size, it's the shape, and it's the pattern, the way they've done the colour. You take a little herring out of the water, he's got this almost translucent sort of belly. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it's more translucent than others, but he's got this flash of silver that highly contrasts the rest of his body, and that's exactly what that colour has. But the size and the shape is what I like. Anyway, I think I've rambled on for ages now. Does anyone have any questions? Anything at all? Feel free to ask me. If you don't want to ask me now, come and talk to me. I'm more than happy to have a chat if you didn't realise already. Dane, I've got a question. Dane's got a question.
Can you draw the first? Like the door prize out.
Clap for the lucky door prize. Alright.
So the guys here at MoTackle have put together 3 pretty sweet prizes. They've got a couple of MoTackle packs with some merch, and obviously an Abu Garcia combo, a Roxani, and a Ray Rex. So I'm going to do one of the little packs first. It's number
Blue E39. Hey.
While he's coming up, obviously you all know, you've probably seen a few signs getting around that the guys here are staying open until 8 o'clock. They're doing 20% off store-wide on everything except for rods and reels and electronics. So all your lures, grab all your stuff here tonight. Look at that, just one of the bags. Cheers. Troy, do you want to get photos? Nah. Do you want to go on the next one too, Dale? Yeah, so the guys are staying open for us so we can stock up on lures for this weekend, and obviously not everyone gets a chance to get here between 9 and 5 normally, so it's a great opportunity to grab some stuff.
E12.
Don't be afraid. There you go. Yep, so we've got a Abu Garcia Ray Rex and a Roxani reel. Looks like an X9 braid in there.
Sorry, half.
Redraw.
Okay, E37.
Does anyone have any? Does anyone have any questions about the comp this weekend? While we're here,
Can't get in.
who's fishing this weekend? Who's not fishing this weekend? So you're here for a bit of a good time. Thanks very much for coming. Like I said, the guys are going to be open till 8. Get in there, grab some stuff. There's plenty of staff in here to help out. Just another big round of applause for the guys that donated some time to come and put on this presentation. And I'm sure if you're too afraid to ask questions, come up and see Dale or any of us now and fire away.
That's all right.
They're different to the old